the show, you're lucky because you get to hear all the silly stuff that I'm saying. And we're still waiting. This is when I could probably get some intro music, just have some stuff jamming while things are getting set up. Testing, testing, testing. Seeing if we're live on all the expected platforms. There we go. It looks like we are. All right, cool. Let's get going. What is up, everybody? It is Wednesday, January 6th. I am your host, Adam Hoffman, and welcome to The Mandate. I'm so excited to have you joining us here today. It looks like some folks are trickling in, and I know that you've got all kinds of stuff that could be capturing your attention right now. So thanks for taking a couple moments to tune in here. I'm super excited for my guest today, and I will get to him here in a second. If you're just tuning in for the first time, Mandate is a show that I created to broadcast these open, honest, authentic conversation between primarily guys, but also lots of other really awesome and interesting people, all on the topic of men's mental health, how we learn to be guys, and the impact that that has on our identities as we grow up and get older and try to go and have an impact on the world. So that's why we're here today, is to have these conversations, to build a community around this. And my goal is to build the world's largest community of men committed to taking their mental health seriously and using that to build healthy identities that help them be amazing men out in the world. And there's lots of other awesome organizations that are out there doing that. We look forward to working with them. And this is just my way of contributing and getting started. So today I've got a new friend of mine, Chase McCants. He is a serial startup guy. He's worked at the cross section of IT and healthcare for a while. He focuses on employee development, training, and all kinds of cool stuff focused on the human beings that make up our organizations. And while we're probably not going to talk about a ton of work today, I think it's important to know what he does professionally, but today you're going to learn more about him as a human. And I guess I should also say he cares a lot about how you feel, which is one of the reasons why we get to be good friends. So with that, let me click a couple buttons, see if I can't get my buddy Chase up here. What's up, Chase?
How's it going?
Good. Thanks for being here, man. Good to see you.
Thanks for having me. Nice to see you too. It's been a little bit, right?
I mean, it always feels like it's been too long. I think you're a guy that I could probably talk to every single day. And if we live close to each other, I'd try to cruise by your house and at least give you a hug or a high five on a daily basis.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's been super awesome getting to know you, and I'm really excited to get to know you a little bit more tonight. I know I'm supposed to talk a bunch, but don't think that I'm not going to turn this stuff back on you.
I hope so, man. I mean, that's why I tried to call it a mandate, is like, usually if you go on a good date, it's not just like you talking to yourself or you talking about yourself or just the other person talking, right?
That's true. That one person talking a lot is pretty indicative of bad dates that I've been on.
There you go. I don't know. Maybe we'll get into that today. Well, let's start off. How are you? What's showing up for you right now today?
Say that one more time.
How are you?
It's been I would say it's been a roller coaster ride of a day. I can't ignore, nor do I want to, what's going on in the country's capital. One of the, I am a huge fan of politics, and I know a lot of people hate politics and it's boring, but or not interesting. But we've seen the incredible things that people who just want to make life for other people better. We've seen the great things that they can do. And I don't know, man, I'm so proud that, our country, our foundation is on democracy. And so it kills me right now to see what's happening in terms of what's being said about our elections, which is, again, the foundation of our country. And so this is tough. It's really, really tough watching this and knowing that this is here. This is stuff that we usually see in other countries. And I don't know what that means for us as Americans. I don't know what that means for us as a country, but we are heading down really troubled path. And I hope we find our way soon. How about you? How are you?
I'm pretty good. I had a weird day as well. Maybe it was trying to just prep me for what was to come, but like didn't sleep well last night, kind of woke up groggy and little, meh. And, but I got a nap in today and I was excited to talk to you. So I was doing my best, but I woke up from that nap and saw all the stuff that was going on today. And I think what stood out to me is that there are so many different parts of this country that are hurting right now in a lot of different ways. And if we keep coming at keep coming at things from a, well, let me say this a little bit differently. I think that there certainly are times where we need to point fingers when things are just like absolutely wrong, unacceptable, and we have to call that stuff out. But then I think there's other times where we need to like set the politics and the narratives aside and actually just like talk and connect as people and be like, what's really showing up for you? Why are you so angry that you feel like you need to storm the Capitol? And why is it okay to react with force when this group storms the Capitol, but with less force when this group storms the Capitol? And I think we need to be able to have those types of conversations to really unearth this, the pain and suffering that I think is underneath it all, and then be there for each other. I mean, there's way too much divisiveness, I think that's out there, and it's hard, and that's why like I'd rather retreat to kind of these more deep conversations with people one-on-one and let the chaos in the world spin out there, because I can come back and connect with somebody and know that we're two humans and we might have different perspectives on things, but we all share in being humans and not wanting to suffer, and I think ultimately wanting to help each other.
I hope so. And I say that because I'm just not sure anymore. And I think that's the thing that troubles me the most. I have spoken to a lot of my friends on the reaction to what's going on today. And it's really tough. I have been a black man in America for 35 years, and I literally saw peaceful protesters being met with force who weren't storming anything. And we don't see anything close to that with some of our white counterparts. And it shows us that we've got a lot of work to do. And I hope that we can use this I hope that this wakes something up, in all of us, that we have some deep issues that we need to work through. And when we see one group, who's met with force after peaceful protests and another group that's not, I don't know. It's tough. But I hope we can work through it.
Yeah, I mean, it's not okay that there are those. I don't know if it's the right use of double standards, but it's just not fucking okay, man.
Yeah, we'll get through it. I hope.
Yeah, there you go. Well, so the topic of today's show is the intersection of masculinity and sexuality, which is, we haven't covered that yet, and it's one that there's lots of nooks and crannies in for a lot of different versions of masculinity and sexuality. So I'm excited to have you be my first person to have this conversation with. Let's jump in with where and how did you learn how to be a guy? Like what it means to be a man?
Yeah. So, I don't know. So, when I grew up, when I was a kid, so my mom was a single parent, right? And we lived a few years with my grandmother. So I was born in California. My mom and I moved to Michigan, and that's where she was born and she grew up. And, I always say it was a house mostly full of women. And they were strong women. My mom worked her ass off to make sure that I had a great experience as a kid. And, the thing that was a little bit different about me was just that my mom and my family never said that this is what it means to be a man, right? That you have to be this way or that way. It was just grow up, be a good person, learn as much as you can, be curious about the world, and do good for other people, And so that shaped who I was. I wish I could see myself when I was a kid to see it, how did I act? Was I masculine or feminine? So I didn't really think about it until I would say probably second or third grade. So I went to a very normal preschool and kindergarten, but my mom. So in Detroit, we got a series of three schools that were called Afrocentric schools. They were still public schools, but the idea was that they were going to be all boys, and it was going to focus on the regular studies, but anytime we talked about history, culture, it was going to be from either the African or African American experience. And so it was going to be an opportunity for us to learn who we are. Well, you can't have an all boys public school. And so that got shut down pretty quickly. But the result was a school that had a majority of men as teachers. And although there were girls went to our schools, if I remember correctly, there was always two classes for each grade. And one was all men, and the other one was mixed gender. Don't know how they got away with that. Yeah. And so that was really my first encounter where someone who was a leader or authority figure was a man. And initially, remember, I started with first grade on that. It really wasn't a huge change. And that's because my first grade teacher was a woman. But my second grade teacher, all the way up to sixth grade, they were all men, and with varying degrees of what it means to be a man. So that school mostly taught me discipline, pride in who I am and who I come from. But it was the first time that I saw, I guess, a positive black male role model everywhere, because it was just a bunch of teachers. But, it still wasn't exactly, you have to be this. That came from, my own sexuality, right? So a lot of people know that I'm gay. I grew up in the 90s. And, when I was growing up, we went from Chase is fat, right? That was the whole thing, is like, you're fat. To this change, which happened around third grade, where the biggest insult was no longer someone's weight. It was calling them gay, or, a more insidious term for that, right? Uh-huh. And then all of a sudden there was this pressure, because I know who I was. I don't know that, I'm pretty sure I knew the word for my attraction. But then there became this need to hide it, because it was the ultimate insult. And if I were found out, I was just afraid of what would happen. I was afraid of how my I wanted to say colleagues, but my fellow students would treat me. I was nervous about how my teachers would treat me. I was nervous about how my family would treat me to a certain extent, but my mom always said from the time I was a kid, I don't care what you are, I will love you anyway. But there was a lot of nervousness about being found out. And so I hid it for a long time. I tried to act as masculine as I could. I often think I was born to be an actor, because as soon as someone said something that I did was quote unquote gay, I would change that immediately, and that would never happen again. And so that, it took its toll after a while. And, and through a series of events through eighth grade, I had switched schools. I had gone to a mixed gender school. It was a charter school in Detroit. My sixth and seventh grade career was great. I had lots of friends. And then eighth grade, I had someone accuse me of being gay. Everyone believed him. And then all those fears that I had throughout those years all of a sudden came to light. And I was bullied for a year, brutally bullied, to the point where I didn't start high school with the most positive mental experience. I probably had some form of PTSD, and I don't want to, minimize that. But all of a sudden, I was acting dramatically different than I was before. And so then masculinity became insanely important, because it was going to protect me from not only that kind of bullying, but now I wasn't protected at all, because the special school that I went to from grade 1 through 6 and the charter school that I went to from grade 6 through 8, that was done. Now I was going to one of the worst high schools in Detroit, both on the education side, on school violence, things like that. And I could not be gay in that world. And so I had to build up what it meant to be a guy, what it meant to be masculine. And it took a toll on me, to the point where I picked my university. I picked Ohio State to get away from having to feel like that. I wanted to be an out gay man. I didn't want to hide it anymore. And so, I don't know that I learned. I guess I learned to be a man through fear. and here's the other thing. So I talked a little bit about my family, right? My family's, for the most part, super cool. Even back then, never felt any pressure to be one way or another. Never called a sissy or Chase, you're acting like a little girl. Never that. But I did have one family member, guy, who I remember this. I remember this to this day. I was watching. You remember the group In Vogue?
Uh-huh.
So In Vogue, there's this. There's a song. Giving them something we can feel, right? So you had that song, and they were doing these dance moves, and I was probably, I don't know, I was a kid, and I was mimicking it. And I remember this family member came up, and he was like, "Don't you ever do that again," right? And I knew exactly what he was talking about because I was mimicking a woman, but he came in with such force that I knew that whatever I had done had crossed some kind of line. And it scared the shit out of me,
Mm-hmm.
And so all of a sudden, there were these barriers. I wouldn't say they were dramatic barriers, but all of a sudden there were these barriers saying, this is what you should be. And deviating from that with certain people could get you in trouble. And I think that made me create some version of myself that wasn't who I was. And I think, like playing any character, it's tiring after a while and you just don't want to do it anymore. So it was tough. But yeah, that's me. What about you, man? This is truly a learning experience for me too, because like when people talk about toxic masculinity, I'm like, why does that even exist? Like, you should just be whomever you want to be, right? I've never had to grow up, except for those incidences, but mostly out of fear of being found out that I was gay, that I had to be masculine. What about you?
Well, I mean, you kind of hit the punchline there at the end. Is it requires so much more damn energy to be something that you're not than it does to be who you are.
Yeah.
And yet we go through most of our life expending that extra energy to live some version of a lie. And either it's a lie that we're telling ourselves, or it's a lie that we know that we're telling to the rest of the world, but we're willing to expend that energy because, like, oh gosh, that fear of like, if I am who I am and people reject it, what does that mean about who I am? That's just so absolutely terrifying. And so first off, I have a gajillion questions that we'll come back to. But what struck me the most, and it's related to my story here, is just how, I hesitate to say this, but I'm just going to go for it. It's like how similar our story is, with a couple very big exceptions. I'm not gay. I have never questioned that or thought that, and that's fine. I'm white. I'm not black, so I didn't have to go through, I'm sure, what the race side of this is as well, especially in a place like Detroit. Like I've heard all sorts of stories from my parents who grew up in Detroit, but yeah, they're white, so they've got a totally different perspective. But for me, you hit on a couple things. I was just like, are you kidding me? Like, how is this possible? So that the whole thing about third grade kind of being the time when the language comes around where we start to label, we get terms like gay and fag and all those other awful ones that start getting thrown around. And I think in third grade for me, like, I remember kids getting called that who probably in hindsight did end up coming out at some point in time, but also a lot of people who got called in the beginning. It felt like it was like the overly effeminate people got called that. I don't even really like using that term, but it was like the way that, oh, if you talk this way, you got called this. But more importantly, like if you behave this way or you didn't do these things that were manly, then, well, you're probably gay because you don't do these things. And so like all through the end of elementary school and through middle school, like that's how I got teased. Like it was, you're gay, you're a fag, like and I was just like, I don't know why you guys are calling me this. Like, I'm not like, I very much like women, and I have no problem with people who do like those of the same sex of themselves, but like, it's not me. Like, what, you guys got the wrong person here. And so then it really got into, okay, well, the way that these guys are behaving, like, I don't really want to do that. Like, I don't need to go around and like puff my chest out and like, try to be all tough to hide like all the pain that I really have inside, that I kind of don't know who I am and what's going on right now. And of course, middle school Adam probably wasn't as, I don't know, reflective or in touch as older Adam is. But I feel like I do remember having conversations with my parents where I'm like, I don't know what these guys are doing. Why are they doing it? And to your point, yeah, the bullying, like, it got physical. And there was this one point that I remember that was in 8th grade, and we were over at a friend's house. They were having some people over in the basement. Their parents were home. Like, it was one of those like parent approved, we can hang out in the basement sort of a things. Music's playing, it's dark, and I'm talking to a group of girls like I usually would, because most of the time girls are willing to like talk about interesting stuff and guys just like want to talk about dumb stuff. And I was like, well, one, I like these girls, so like I want to hang out with them, and they're more interesting to talk to because like they'll just open up about stuff, and I don't know, I like that. And so I'm standing over there talking, and then I got this feeling, and I was like, something's not right. And I turned around and I just get clocked and hit the floor. 2 weeks prior to that, I had got a concussion from playing hockey. And so like, I'm like borderline knocked out, don't know what's going on. I'm worried that like, I'm just going to get piled on top of, scramble up the stairs, chaos ensues. And I'll never forget this moment. I'm like in tears sitting on this chair, and the kid that punched me is sitting next to me, and my mom gets there and she's just yelling at this kid. And I'm like, go mom, go mom. You're saying all the things that I always wanted to say. And she goes, why did you hit my son? And I was like, oh, this is going to be good. And in some mumbled, distressed state that this kid's in, he's like, well, because he was talking to the girls, and, they should be talking to us, and I didn't know what to do. And I was like, that's the reason, is like that people want to talk to me and they like me. And this is how you're going to show that they shouldn't do that, is like by physically beating me. And that was just like such an eye-opening moment for me that, yeah, I mean, for the next year and a half, I was legitimately traumatized. Like, couldn't go to school, was always looking over my shoulder, anxiety, all that kind of good stuff. But then as I kind of settled into myself, I was like, oh my God, this makes so much more sense. So that was kind of like my experience. And like you, I didn't have, between my mom and my dad, the most like extreme be a man thing that I got was when I was playing sports, and my dad would be like, be more aggressive, Adam, be more aggressive. But I never got the like, man up, don't be a pussy. I got that like from plenty of other places, but certainly not from my parents. And my mom, especially, she was always one who was very like trying to get me to do more artistic and creative things, because she enjoyed that stuff, and she believed that I was good at it and did it too. But then as I got older, like, I love singing. I was in choir for a while, and then it was like, well, all the gay kids are in choir. So like, either you must be gay if you're still in choir. And I was like, no, I just kind of like singing. Even liking boy bands. Like, I fucking love boy bands, and I'm not afraid to sing that, because like I'll still sing in the car to like some NSYNC Bye Bye Bye. I was doing it yesterday, man. Because like, I like doing it. I like performing. I've been doing it since I was a little kid, but it became like, it was gay. It was not a manly thing. So just don't do it. And so I just like didn't do that stuff.
It's interesting, or probably more sad than anything else. How much do we not allow ourselves to experience certain things because it is not masculine, right? I wonder how many actors out there, or singers out there, or dancers out there, or it could have been all of those things, if it wasn't associated with or something that seems to challenge masculinity. You're right. Yeah, there were lots of gay guys in theater. Like that was what I went to. I tried sports, and I probably could have been okay at it. Probably should have played football, but like I like theater more. And And, again, I just think back to how many of the guys at my school could have been really, really amazing actors if they were encouraged to do so, right? But instead, they're pushed to other things that, maybe they had an interest in, or maybe they only had an interest in because it's what you're supposed to do. And that sucks. And the reason I always think it sucks is because, like, we only have this life, and I know you hear that all the time, but I constantly think about how finite life is, and if you're spending so much of it doing something that you don't like, you don't get that back. It's not like a purchase that you make that sucks and you just save up your money to make a better one. You don't get that time back. And so, no, I completely get that. And it makes me fortunate. Like, as I think about this stuff in my experience, I like want to hug my mom even more because she never cared. She never thought about, or she obviously had examples of what masculinity is, and what, how a man should be raised. And she just didn't fall for it. She said, my son is going to be curious, and I'm going to encourage that curiosity. And no matter what he wants to do, as long as it doesn't break the law. And I love her for that, so.
Yeah, it's amazing. And it's the more that I've become, this masculinity itself was what really started opening my eyes to all of the, the programming that exists out there that says, well, if you have this characteristic, you should be this way, right? Like, and I have to imagine there's some degree of it with, if you're a guy, you must be this way. If you're a woman, you must be this way. If you're black, you must be this way. If you're,
I get that all the time.
yeah, if you're smart, you must be this way. And it's like, why are we so fascinated with putting people in boxes? Because, like, no, if somebody ever realizes they're in a box, they're like, don't put me in this box. Like, don't label me. Like, I don't want to be this way. And yet we're still all so cool with, continuing to live this, like, programming that we're just not conscious of. And the impact that it's had on me has been, when I look back at all the things that I wish that I would have stuck with, but I didn't, because I thought that I would be judged or bullied or physically abused or whatever it is for doing it. And it gives me as much empathy as I can possibly have, given that, like, that was my experience as a straight white guy, versus all the people that have, other parts of their being that get criminalized, prosecuted, beat in different ways that, like, I could never even fathom. I mean, what about you?
So I'm gonna say one thing. Rarely will I say this, but I don't judge your experience based on other people. I was talking about this the other day. The worst things to happen to us is the worst thing to happen to us. And yes, you will always find someone else who's had a worse experience than you, but you don't get to experience that thing. You see it from afar and you can empathize with that person. But the worst thing to happen to you is the worst thing to happen to you. And I don't want anyone to ever limit their experience or judge the outcome of those really terrible things based on other people's experiences. So, you don't have to apologize for that. I'm a black man in America, but guess what? There are lots of people throughout the world who have way worse experiences than mine, but that doesn't trivialize what I've gone through. And I would say the same thing for you. It is good that we understand those things in context, but we should always fall back on, if something has happened to you and it has had an impact, do not judge it based on other things that are going on in the world. That's how I think a lot of people end up not working on issues that they need help with, right? So if I go through a bad breakup, right, and I go through a certain depression, I might not seek help, even though it's staying with me longer than it should, because you know what? It's not the worst thing in the world, but it is, because it is the worst thing in the world for you. So don't do that ever again. That is my command to you.
Noted. That is your mandate to me. It's such a good message, man, because your experience is your experience. My experience is my experience. And that's all that matters. And
Right.
it's, that's kind of the message wrapped up in all this. It's like, be who you are. Like what I have plastered on my computer, on my whiteboard, it's like, no one can beat you at being you, period.
Very
Like
true.
that's it. That's what it comes down to. But you brought up, some good topics that, just then. Have you ever dealt with any type of depression, anxiety, mental health challenges like that?
Yeah, so I usually don't admit it out loud. So I've done it to a few folks. So I have had depression since I was very young. Did not have a name for it, so I would always kind of blame it on things in my life, and say that was the reason. Until I was about 26, I had a manager whose husband had major depressive disorder, and so I asked her a little bit about it, and she was describing like how he gets sad. He gets really, really sad at random points for no reason. And so I started really thinking about, in the days going forward, are my bouts of sadness, are they actually rooted in something that's happened, or is it something more than that? And there was no source. There were some days where I woke up and it's not just regular sadness. It's not like I'm hurt. It is a deep sense of shame or a deep sense of sadness, and sometimes it's just hard to function. So yes, and I guess more recently, yeah, anxiety. I joke around and say I've dealt with depression my entire life. I'm a pro at that. But anxiety is something that I've since developed in only the last few years. As I've stepped a bit out of my comfort zone, worked a job for a really, really long time over at Cover My Meds. And it was scary walking away from that. And I piled a lot of pressure on myself to the point where I was dealing with this problem of being anxious and not being able to sleep. And it was just a mess. And so, yeah, both of those things.
Yeah,
What about
those are
you?
real. I had no idea that the depression for you was something that you've dealt with the majority of your life is what it sounds like.
Yeah, I joke around and say that I'm an emo kid, and it is true. I love really. I was in an emo band years ago, but yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where, yeah, again, before I knew what it was, I would just blame it on things. I would say like, this is the reason that I'm sad. This is the thing that sucks. And nowadays, it's not that I have control over it, but I will describe it as I am a puppet that sees its strings, right? I have to work through it. And so a good analogy for it is if I put like green glasses on, right? I can see the sky and it will look green to me, but in my brain, I know the sky is blue, right? And so when I'm dealing with bouts of depression, usually I feel hypersensitive in some way. It's not one way or another, but something will go wrong that day, as they usually do. And then I just sink into this hole. And again, I can't emphasize that it's not just regular sadness. Usually it's an extreme amount of shame and it's instead of regular sadness, it's this deep sadness. And so I have to say, like, Chase, you're not actually sad. I know that the sky looks like it's green. It's actually blue. I know that you feel sad, and you do feel sad, but it's nothing that's going on right now. You just need to get through this day, and tomorrow the sky will be blue again, and you will feel better.
What helped? I think you said at 26, you like actually got diagnosed with depression. What was talk more about what helped you get to that point where you're like, oh, it's a thing. I have this thing.
Yeah, so I'll never forget my I had a manager. I was working at AT&T, and again, she what was it? She brought it up about I don't know if it was someone she was seeing currently or back then, but she brought it up, and I can't remember what the sentence was, but I just started interrogating her a little bit, and I was like, so he gets sad, like, okay, like for no reason? And she says, yeah, like, he'll either wake up and feel this way, or he will, be going about his day and then it just hits him. And he just, he can't function, not like he can't function, but he can't do his work, and his reactions towards me are completely different. Like, we have an understanding, but it's tough for him. And so I just kept asking her questions, and as she was answering them, I was like, I think this is me. I think this is me. This is what's going on. But again, I had always tied it to something that was going on in my life. And then, so this happened, right? This conversation happened, and I don't remember when the span of this was, but I remember this incident like crazy. I was so this was the week, a later weekend, and I was going to meet my good friend Anthony. We were going to a show at Scully's here in Columbus, Ohio. It was a rock show. And I remember I left my house and I was good. Like, I was pumped about this show. And within 10 to 15 minutes when I arrived to park, I could barely get out of my car because I had just been hit with this extreme sadness. Nothing happened between my house and going to Scully's. But I had to coach myself out of the car because my friends were waiting on me. And it was just tough. It was the toughest thing. And that's when I think I realized this is exactly what you have. This is exactly what it is. Now you know, right? Now you know it's not, based on anyone that you work with. It's not a certain situation. I did give myself the flexibility that things can still make me angry and things can still make me sad. But when it appears out of nowhere, and particularly when it is so extreme, because there is regular sadness. I get sad like normal people do, but my depression is 10 times worse. All of a sudden I had a word for it. All of a sudden I had a diagnosis for it. And that was the path, or that started the path of me functioning with it. And I don't think I've ever told that story to anyone. I should probably thank her for it. But yeah, that's it.
It's amazing to be able to have those people in your life that can, literally change the trajectory is what it sounds like to me, especially when it comes to seeking help. And I love that you pointed out that it was having language for the thing that you were experiencing that really opened it up. And I found that to be true for myself, and in having these types of conversations with others, is that, I guess going back a little bit to what you said earlier, is like, everybody's experience is their own. It's unique. You can't take that from anybody, right? And so your depression might be different from somebody else's depression, and that's okay. That's how it is. But they might not know to call it depression until they hear somebody else talk about, oh, well, this is what I was experiencing. It's called this thing. And you're like, oh, maybe I have that thing, which kind of opened up the ability for you to go and do something about it.
So, like, 100% that. You made me think of two things. I'm going to spit these at you really quick. So first off, this happened to me with an old colleague of mine. We were talking about imposter syndrome. I had never heard of that word before. So this was years ago. This was probably like, I would say 2015, 2016. It was an intern. He came and he was like, I was trying to do my work, and he came in and he was like bothering me at my desk. And he was just like, yeah, I got this thing called imposter syndrome. And I'm like, okay, stop making up things and let me do my work. But I Googled it and I started reading it, and I was like, holy shit, right? At any rate, years later, I did a training, one at Beam, and then I did a repeat. I did 3 trainings. I did one at a local meetup here called Tech EI. And then I did a longer version of it for Beam. And then I did another version for my current company, Olive AI. And every single time afterwards, someone says, I didn't know that this was a thing. And I am certain that this is what I deal with on a daily basis. Right. And so we get to have that discussion. And at the last training, I used that exact same thing. I told everyone that if you see if you see light versions of this, it might not be imposter syndrome. It might just be that natural thing of being uneasy about our abilities, but ultimately moving forward. But if it's to the point where you cannot function, it might actually be this thing. And I ended it with, now you are, if this is you, now you are a puppet that can see its strings, right? So now move forward with that knowledge and do what you need to do to either give yourself more confidence or to talk yourself through these issues or just seek help, right? And we have a long list of ways that can help out. The other thing that you reminded me of, especially since we were talking about sexuality, for a long time, I knew what being gay was, but the only examples that I had of what gay men were the stereotypes that were on television, right? And usually that's overly effeminate men, being as fabulous as I am, girl, right? And I thought, well, I don't act like that. Does that make me not gay? Not that I was running towards that. This was before I knew that being gay was quote unquote, a problem. I just all of a sudden thought I was this unnatural thing, because if I was gay, I'd be that. And I would have a definitive term and look for it. But that's not me. And if I were straight, then I would definitely like women and not like guys. So now I'm even wrong in these areas. And it took me years to see an example of a masculine gay man to know that, no, that I am gay, and we just come in all shapes and sizes and ways of acting and demeanor. Thank God for Rent the Musical, because that was my first example of not only a gay masculine man, but a gay black masculine guy, right? So it showed me that I wasn't weird or off or anything. It showed examples. So I say all that because if you can put words to it, if you can identify with someone or something, it makes it easier to process through all this. But the only way that we can do that is by speaking up about it, right? To give examples or show that examples are out there. I often talk about Harvey Milk, right? There's this, if you've ever seen this, so Harvey Milk was a politician out in California, I think during the 70s. And there was a movie about him years ago. I was going to say a few years ago. It's been like a long time. There's this point in the film where they're saying, like, how do we move forward with all this? Like, how do we create change? And someone says, you need to come out, right? You need to tell people that you're gay. Because right now, the only thing that they know is, the only thing they know is either the stereotype or, the worst characterizations of what it means to be gay. They need to know that their neighbors are gay, their doctors are gay, all that good stuff, right? And they were right. And so I think that translates with mental health, right? I am just now getting, like, me admitting my own mental illnesses in a very public way. Like, this is the first time I've ever done that. And I only mentioned it to my former colleagues upon leaving the organization, right? When because often when I go through these bouts, my colleagues are the ones that help me through it. They just didn't know it. They just are acting their normal selves. But if we can come out and talk about this stuff, especially men who are prone to suicide because we don't talk about how we're feeling or the things that we're going through, more of us have to come out about our struggles, about our vulnerabilities, about our upbringing, and how our upbringings are different and how they have a deep impact on us. Remember that a lot of what we experience as children and teenagers, that doesn't go away. And so if we can talk about those things, we can start working through them. We can be puppets who see our strings, right? And by the way, I got that from Watchmen, the graphic novel. He talks about that. But I think it definitely applies here, puppet that sees its strings.
I love all different kinds of visuals and analogies for trying to describe this stuff, because sometimes it feels too conceptual. But when you can put language on it, so you've got words and then you've got like a visual, it's like, oh, okay, now this stuff starts making more sense. Like I can actually wrestle with it, as opposed to, just throwing around ideas that when I say them out loud, I feel a little bit crazy to say them. It's like, telling somebody that it took me 2 hours to get out of bed. It felt weird. It was like, well, there's something wrong with me then. And the answer was like, yeah, there is. You need some support. You need some help. But in the moment, with that one in particular, it feels like you can't say that out loud because once again, I mean, you hit on this too a little bit, is like we have these experiences as we're growing up as kids that train us in a way to not do specific things. It's like, well, all those times that you thought that something weird was happening and you brought it up, like, you got made fun of. So maybe don't bring that stuff up. Just keep it to yourself. But then as you get older, it's not like that stuff goes away. There was actually, oddly enough, I was at the chiropractor this morning getting adjusted, and I'd love to have him on the show sometime because we have a very different chiropractor. Like we don't go to a guy that like we walk in there and he like cracks our neck, pops our back and then sends us on our way. He has this like whole different type of system that really works the body in a different way. And so today he is doing his normal thing. And he's like, yeah, I think what I'm seeing is like an emotional block that you have somewhere. And so the adjustment that he gave me was like on a specific part of my face and in my hand to release it. I was like, oh, I feel pretty good. That's interesting. And then he told this story about a lady who had been in a very, very serious accident and had been dealing with PTSD her whole life and tried all sorts of treatments for the trauma, went to go see this guy that's mentored our chiropractor. And, they were doing this kind of like pressure point. That's not even the right word. So don't fault me on this, but like some type of pressure point release thing that like all these memories then came flooded in that had been previously blocked out from her, where she had like literally blacked out this period of her life where she was in this coma, dealing with this trauma of getting hit by a truck or whatever it was. Not to trivialize it, I just don't remember, but it was something severe like that. And then she just starts saying it all. It's like, oh no, I was laying on the hospital bed and it was cold and this was happening. And I say all that because there's these things that we go through life carrying with us. And if we're not conscious about how we're going to process them and bring them up and acknowledge them so that we can, be free from them in some extents, it just means that you're unconsciously being held back by these things that you're not aware of it, either because you literally can't like access them in your brain, or to your point, you don't know what the word is for them. And you don't have a positive role model to be able to say like, oh, that person is modeling the thing or talking about the thing that sounds like it's true for me. Now I have permission to go and explore that more.
Yeah. I mean, we have to come out more. That's really what it's about. We have to be able to talk about this. Usually I don't really talk about, when we talk about, diversity, equity, inclusion. When we think about mental health, I feel bad for my straight white male friends, and straight white men in general, because I first off, again, it's not to minimize anything that any of us minorities are going through. The other side of that is, a very conscious straight white man would say something similar to what you said earlier. It's like, what do I have to worry about? I've got everything. I have no reason to complain, right? But that's not true. We lose so many people because they think that, what reason should I have to feel bad? And then they make an ultimate decision that can't be changed. And so I hope that we can get to, I love where we are right now. Let me not say that. I don't love where we are right now. I love the trajectory that we're going in, because it wasn't too long ago that you could not talk about some of this stuff without people looking at you a little bit weird. Like if you took me 10 years ago, a lot of us 10, 20 years ago, we would have never admitted any of this out loud because people think you're crazy. People think that you're just, you just get sad and everybody gets sad, right? No big deal. But nowadays, folks are starting to take it seriously and people are not stigmatizing it. And man, I just hope that one day, and I hope that that day comes soon, that us dudes start seeking help, especially ones that grew up being told that they have to be a certain way and talking about your feelings is weakness. I can't wait for a time where we don't have to lose anybody on this anymore. And that it's okay to admit any of this. Just like, it's okay for me to say I'm gay or, anything like that. I hope we get to a day where, when we see someone with a mental health issue, we treat them with the same amount of empathy as someone who has cancer or struggles with another kind of illness that you can see. I hope.
I love that. It makes me think, do you have these types of conversations with your friends?
Every so often, yeah, we'll talk about, we'll talk about mental health. I try to, I often try to forget about forget about my own situation, and so I'm like, let's talk about anything other than how sad I feel right now. But we do talk about it, and it's nice, especially. I think for me personally, I usually only open up about how I feel with my boyfriend, and even that feels awkward. It feels like being vulnerable in that way feels weird because you just want to, like, I don't know, quote unquote, be normal. But yeah, we talk about it, and it's still awkward and weird, but every day it gets a little bit easier.
Yeah. Yeah, it's one of those things where it usually doesn't come up in my certainly not in a day-to-day conversation, but sometimes it'll meander there. But only because I've had a couple of my friends tell me like, yeah, I mean, the things that I feel comfortable telling you, it just feels like it's a safe place to do it. And so there's this like yearning inside of guys that I know is there to, be able to ask questions, be like, hey, I've been feeling this. Like, is this normal? Or have you felt this? Or like, what is this emotion that's going on here that, is making me think these things? And to your point, being able to make sure that that is okay. I mean, that's, part of the underlying mission of me just hosting these conversations in the first place is that people can look at, two guys like us and be like, oh, well, we see ourselves, a little bit in them. Maybe I could go and have this conversation with my wife, my boyfriend, my partner, my guy that I play sports with, what have you. So tell me a little bit more about like.
Hold on, I got to ask you a question.
Yeah.
Why do you think that they feel comfortable talking to you about it? Like, how do you think you're different than their other friends that they don't feel comfortable talking to them about some of these feelings?
Oh, because I talk about it pretty openly.
You talk about it like yourself, or do you ask them?
It'll like, I would say when stuff comes up, I'm not afraid to be honest about how I feel or what I think or what I've gone through. And that usually is enough of like oh, hey, that's not normal. He's not just kind of glossing over it. For example, like on my hockey team, the team knows me as the guy that when the locker room talk starts to get too misogynistic, like I'm going to say something about it. And so I think like I've just kind of made myself known that I'm the guy that is comfortable standing up for things and drawing a line in the sand. And I'm also the guy that's comfortable asking people about how they're really doing, and not just letting people off the hook. And that doesn't feel good necessarily. The way that I just put is like letting people off the hook, but it's not like I'm forcing people to talk about their feelings.
You say, how are you doing? You're like, no, fucking seriously, how are you doing?
How are you really doing?
Where does that come from? Like, is that something that you learned from your parents, or was that something that you picked up over the years, or was there like a moment where that just stuck with you? Like, I should give a shit beyond.
We may have just lost Chase momentarily on a great freaking question. So let's see if he pops back in with us. I'm gonna bump him off screen momentarily to see if he comes back. So Chase was just asking me why do I feel, or where did I learn how to ask that second question of like, how are you really doing? And I think that that's a really important thing to think about. Oh, here we go. Welcome back. Welcome back. All right. So you were just asking me like, how did I learn, or why did I decide to start doing this?
Well, just like what, you said that you care about how your friends are feeling and that it's different with you than it is with them. How did you learn that? Like, was this something that your parents instilled in you, that it's okay to talk about how you're feeling? It's okay to ask other people in a genuine way how they're doing and go down that route? Or did you have to learn it later on?
I don't know if I have a good answer for you right off the top of my head. I've never actually thought about where that came from. My first reaction is I didn't learn it from my parents. My dad still to this day would rather not talk about how he's actually doing. Like when I try to pull that move on my dad, it doesn't really, it rarely will it get me somewhere. And every now and again, it will just end up in like a big release of emotions, which is like, that's why I'm doing this, Dad. Like I want to connect with you. I don't just want to talk about how Michigan State football is doing. Like, come on. Like I know what you do at work. It's boring enough. Like let's talk about you and you're getting older and closer to retirement, all that kind of stuff. I think if I had to guess, it was I've always been curious about people. And that's been true of me from like a very young age. I don't think that I realized the power of creating space for vulnerability by either like sharing my own self authentically or by literally making space for other people's self to come in. And it doesn't strike me as something that's commonplace, right? Like we kind of go through life in most cases passing as ships in the night, and every now and again we take time to like actually understand how people are doing. And what I realized, and this is another one of those things that like I only got comfortable with recently, is that I get more energy from talking about the hard, deep stuff than talking about surface level stuff. So like when I have to know that I just have to like have little chitter chatter, small talk conversations, oh God, it drains me like that. But I mean, I could talk to you for hours about this type of stuff, and not because like I want to, be a therapist or anything. It's because I just genuinely care about people. And then I think what helps is like getting positive reinforcement from people being like, yeah, that was really helpful. And it's like, okay, well, maybe I should do more of it.
Yeah, no, there's this, there was a story I read a little bit ago. I think it was in the Washington Post, but it talked about how men, because of quarantine, how their usual relationships that are based on sports or football or going out and getting a drink, well, now you can't do any of those things. So what are you left with, right? You can't use those things as a crutch anymore. And so a lot of men are either had to confront things that they've just never had to because they could distract themselves with the world, right? And now everyone's here. Or they've had to start talking to their friends about things other than, sports or drinks or things that usually are happening that are no longer happening. And it's tough in certain instances because they may not have the words to describe how they're feeling. And so I don't know. I hope at some point, I hope they find a friend like you where they can talk about those things and it's encouraged.
I'm with you, man. That's why, I want to build this community that really fosters it. So yeah, that you can go to, I don't know if it's gonna be called the mandate, but you can go to the mandate and you'll always find another guy who's, ready and willing to have these types of conversations. I'd love to know for you, have you seen an uptick in those types of conversations since COVID?
So I'm kind of like you. I joke and say I care a lot about your feelings, but it's true. And so if you are going to be friends with me, I genuinely care about how you're doing. And yeah, there has been an uptick. I think, when COVID first started, a lot of my friends who are extroverts, within about 2 days, they were really, really struggling with isolation. Me, who have been, feel like I've been running for a while because of, moving from company to company and just doing a lot, even outside of work. I was like, sweet, I get to stay home and not do anything. But then after 4 months, even I started feeling like that. And so, initially I was the person listening and encouraging those conversations. And then after 4 or 5 months, it became me who needed to talk about how I was not doing well with what was going on. And I remember I met up with my band. We all had a rule that we could see each other, but it had to be outside and we had to stay apart from each other. And I probably had, it wasn't a crazy moment, but it was just like, I am not doing well with this. I need to be around people, and I didn't know that I needed to, but I'm not doing well. And they listened to me, and it was, we talked it out. And, I wish that I could say I felt better afterwards. The situation had not improved, but at least I got to speak that out loud, and I got to lean on them for support. So yes, lots of those conversations more recently, because even the folks who are usually the listeners, I think we've needed someone to listen to us.
For sure. For sure. Yeah. That article, I'm gonna guess a lot more guys read that article than would probably tell you that they read it, and it had a big impact on them. Just that's the most sent to me article of
Really?
all year. Yeah. And I know a lot of it's because, I've kind of started putting myself out there as this is my thing, but also the number of people that sent it to me and then also shared it and then continue to mention it. It's like, okay, this was seen by a lot of people, which is great. I mean, that's what we need, people to see that it's possible and what's happening and what we need. And like, we all crave as humans belonging and connection. And COVID, for sure, I mean, it's one of those like weird silver linings of it all, is that it's kind of brought some stuff to the surface to say like, hey, yeah, we got to go do something about this now. It's been hiding. All this stuff has been hiding in the shadows. Now there's a little bit of light on it. It's got permission to come out. So let's make it, create some safe spaces for it to actually come out and then do something about it.
Yeah, yeah. And I don't know. I hope that that's it, because there was another story that I read about, a few vets who usually were out doing speaking gigs, and they're gone, because they had to isolate. And I don't even know if it was a question of them not being able to talk about their feelings. I don't know. I don't know them personally, and I didn't follow them. But, I hope, I don't know. I hope that, for, oh man, I don't know how to phrase this, because I hope that, if there is something good that came out of COVID, it is men talking about how they feel, because all the other distractions that would usually draw our attention, they're not there exactly. But at the same time, it's because those distractions that aren't there that we've lost some folks, in the U.S., some men in the U.S. who, I don't know. I don't know what to do with that. But I think if there is a positive outcome, is that we are talking about it and people are admitting it. And I'm hoping that they're seeking help.
I'm with you on that. This is the time in no, that's not the right way to put it. This is like the most challenging time in my life in terms of having to hold multiple extremes at the same time, where you look at just with COVID in and of itself, and you've got the number of people that are dying that humanity is losing on a daily basis is staggering. But it's also so staggering that, you look at all the psychology behind those types of numbers, like we've kind of just become numb to it. We had the most number of Americans on a single day yesterday, I think is what it was. And that just like, it seems like that's always just yesterday.
Yeah.
And we get a little bit numb to it. And at the same time, you look at the progress that science has made when it comes to the development of this vaccine and all this new technology that, we rallied together globally to be able to come together and do. And yeah, more conversations are happening. So you've got like great stuff that's happening and just absolute tragedy happening at the same time. And we're just like, there are all these polarities happening right now.
Yeah. 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 It's a weird combination of feelings, and it's like you almost don't know what to feel, because you're right. There's this dichotomy that you're dealing with. But I don't know. I think, we try to see the good in where we can. We would hope that none of this would have ever happened, right? If we could trade it out. But I think it's moderately good to focus on what could be good in it. And I think men hopefully talking about how they feel if we could hope for some good outcome, it's that.
Yeah, let's learn what we can so that we don't, all the tragedy and the horrible stuff doesn't just go by the wayside. Let's learn from it, and then let's look for all the good stuff and double down, as much as possible. I want to end on this topic of coming out, and
okay,
it's got, now to me it has double meaning, because I've always thought about coming out in the sense of, well, I'm coming out that I'm gay and I'm telling everybody now. But I really like it in terms of coming out with your feelings or with your struggles or with your challenges, and just being open about your humanity, whether that's your sexuality, whether that is the qualities that you want to embrace as a man. So if you have one final message or parting thoughts on how to come out and be yourself, what would you want to leave people with?
Oh man, that's tough. You know, here's how I positioned it. This was I don't know, this was the only wise thing I think I can take from my high school self. When I chose Ohio State as my school, it was purposeful. I wanted to be able to get back home, but I wanted to be far enough away that my mom couldn't just surprise me, right? So that was number one. And I picked Ohio State because it was a large school. And I remember before I went, I said, there are 50,000 people that go to the Ohio State University. And if one of them doesn't like me because I'm gay, then there are 49,999 other people who might, right? So that started this trend of just not giving a fuck about what people think to a certain extent. Now, I am not without being afraid of what people think. Like, I somewhat obsess over that in certain areas, particularly when it has to do with my art or my work, because it feels very personal, right? But as far as me as a human being, I just don't care, because I extended that out. There are 330 million people in these United States of America. And if one person doesn't like me because of whatever reason, then there are hundreds of millions of more who might. And so when you're looking at your own life, I would say, number one, think about the people around you. They love you, no matter if you're gay or if you are dealing with mental illness, whatever it might be. If the people around you, if you feel it in your soul that they love you, chances are they are not going to give a shit, right? They just want to support you. They want you to keep going. They want you to enjoy life as much as they can. So it's okay to speak that stuff out loud, okay? And if they don't, know that there are hundreds of thousands or millions of people out there who will, right? And so sometimes it takes moving, right? Sometimes it means that you move from one school to another or one town to another. Sometimes you move from Michigan to Ohio, right? To get away from your old classmates. And sometimes it means that your friends change after that. And that's okay. I've got a good friend. She's the keyboardist in my band. Her name's Kristen Green. And we were talking one night and she said something that I keep repeating all the time, is that relationships work until they don't. And when they don't, it's okay to move on. It's okay to move on. And so if I've got my group of friends and I come out, right, I tell them I'm gay and they're like, oh, that's weird. Okay. That means our relationship no longer works. And that's okay. It doesn't take away from the years we had before. It doesn't take away from the things that I learned from them or the good times that they had. But it does mean that from this point on, our relationship doesn't work and it's time for me to move on. And so if you're a guy out there or anyone out there and you are trying to come out and it doesn't go the way that you hoped, it's okay. It means that relationship has met its end and it's time for you to move on. And it's time for you to explore other relationships out there. We had this saying back in the day where there were a lot of high school students who were being bullied. And I was in college already, but there was a lot of high school students being bullied for whatever reason. And there was this whole thing of saying, it gets better, right? It gets better. And I was hearing this as not a high school student, but a college student. And I can say that that's true. It does get better. Sometimes you have to take dramatic steps for it to get better, right? It might not get better in your house if you still live with your parents. It might not get better with your circle of friends. It might not get better unless you move to a different place. But do the things that, first off, live your authentic life. It is too draining, and there isn't enough years in our lives to live our lives as anyone other than ourselves, okay? That's number one. Be your authentic self. And then seek out people who will love you for exactly who you are, flaws and all, right? I hate auto-tune. This is going to make sense, I swear. I hate auto-tune a lot because I don't want a perfect voice when someone sings. I want to hear them. There's this artist that I really, really love. His name is Andrew McMahon. He was in Something Corporate back in the day and then did Jack's Mannequin. Now he's doing his own thing. There's this song that I love when he was in Jack's Mannequin called, oh man, now I'm forgetting it because I'm on camera. I think it's called Caves. And his voice cracks in it, right? And usually you go in and auto-tune the fuck out of it, but he kept it, right? Because that is his voice. That is who he is. We should live with who we are. I love my boyfriend because he is exactly who he is, flaws and all. And I hope that he loves me for the same reason. And I love all my friends for all of their flaws because we are human and we are people. And so if that is you, there is someone and probably thousands of people who would love to meet you. All you have to do is give them a chance. And like I said, sometimes that means leaving the relationship so you can enter into new ones. Think about how many times we've changed relationships over the years, not with just significant others, although that happens, right? But even just with the friends in our lives. So be your authentic self. Demand that your friends accept you for who you are. And if they don't, that relationship is done. Go find people who do, because we don't have a lot of years on this earth. And come out. It's tough. I am still uncomfortable talking about my own mental illness because I have been taught for years and years and years that it's mental health and it's just, everybody gets sad, right? And we've had that repeated in our lives. So now that we know that that is not true, now that we're puppets that we can see our strings, it's okay to come out, right? People reject you, fuck them, right? Go to the people who will accept you and who will embrace you and will help you on those really, really tough days. And if they can't, then it's time to find someone else. And I can't say that enough. Relationships work until they don't. And when they don't, it's okay to move on. And you should find the people who love you. There are thousands, millions of them who are waiting for the opportunity to do that.
Powerful message, my friend. And I don't think we could have closed on a better one to share with everybody. So thank you for being here today. I really enjoyed our conversation. You were so generous with your vulnerability and your personal story and your wisdom. I look forward to having you on again in the future.
Yeah, don't invite other people to our date, man. There was folks here. I thought this was just me and you. Weird date, man.
It's like we're dating a bubble, So like we let everybody watch it. One day when it's cool, I'm just gonna host these in the middle of Central Park or someplace like that. We'll host them in the middle of campus at the Ohio State University. We'll do another one.
Go Bucks! All right,
man. Thanks for being here tonight.
Thanks, Sam.
See ya. All right, everybody. That wraps up tonight's mandate with Chase McCants. If you are looking to get in touch with him, that is him on LinkedIn. As he told me earlier, please send him a message because he doesn't connect with people that he doesn't know. But that is the place that he would love to hear from you. If you have questions, comments, or thoughts from him, please go there. You can find him on LinkedIn, Chase McCants. And of course, you can follow the mandate on Twitter and Instagram and on YouTube. Just look us up there. And then we'll be posting the recording of this show. You can listen to it as a podcast here coming up soon. If I can figure out maybe even a transcript and all sorts of other goodness on mandate.com, make sure you sign up so that you get notified when we've got new guests coming on, as well as when recordings are pushed live. We'll get you taken care of on our email list and probably start sending out some other goodies throughout the week to help you think about some of these topics that we talk about, send out some good reminders, and just keep your mental health top of mind. And last but certainly not least, tomorrow we have, Friday, we have another great guest coming up who is the author of Reinventing Masculinity. And we're going to talk about just how reinventing masculinity is going. And that's going to be a fascinating conversation. So thank you so much for hanging around tonight. I always appreciate the time to get to talk about something that means a lot to me and hopefully give you some ahas along the way. So I'm your host, Adam Hoffman, and we will see you here in a couple of days. See ya.